Hi there, this is TJ Hoisington, and if you haven't already noticed, I have written the continuation or the sequel to the Swiss Family Robinson story, and I'm so excited to be able to share it with you. Now, just so I'm clear, the book has not been released yet, but I wanted to share with you quickly a little bit of the backstory. How did this story come about? Where did it begin? Well, it was over 10 years ago when my two oldest kids were 5 and 3 years old, and I decided to have movie night with them. And so I pulled out that old Disney classic movie that was produced in 1960, Swiss Family Robinson. And I remember taking that VHS tape and I put it in the player, and we sat back, popped a little bit of popcorn, and we watched it that night. And my kids' eyes were glued to the screen. I love that movie. I think when I was a kid, I must have watched that movie at least 50 times. And so we watched that movie, and since they've watched it many times over and over again as well, just as I did when I was a kid. I just loved it. It was fun. It was fun-filled and creative, and they lived in a treehouse. I always thought that would be awesome to do, right? Well, we watched the movie that night. After the movie was through, I put my children to bed, and then I went to bed. I fell asleep, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, boom, my eyes opened, and I had a whole sequel of an idea, a vision, if you will, of whatever happened to the family after they first became shipwrecked on the island. What was the future for that family? And I decided that night that I was going to write it. The ideas began to flow. I tell you what, they wouldn't stop coming in. So rather than sleep, I got out of bed, I grabbed my laptop, and I started to type all those ideas that were flooding in my mind. I think I wrote from 1 a.m. to about 6 a.m. in the morning. Before you knew it, I had about 50 pages of bullet points. I then, over the next couple months, began to morph it into a screenplay, which was easy for me to do, right? Because it's just dialogue and then descriptions of scenes. And so that was easy because the whole vision, the idea was there. But as life would have it, and providing for my family and growing my business at the time, I shelved the idea, right? After writing the screenplay, I kind of put it away. And then a couple years later, I pulled it back out and I sent it to a ghostwriter to help morph into a novel. But I didn't like the direction that they were going, so I stopped that. And then I think it was a couple years later, I had some images drawn, and then I didn't like those images. They didn't match my idea of what the characters looked like and what the scenes looked like, so I put that away. And then it was a year and a half ago in the month of May, I got this strong impression, this idea to finish the book. And so for the next year, I began to focus on it almost 100% of the time. I tell you what, I burned the midnight oil. It was awesome as I dove into these characters. I got to know them intimately, if you will, and I could see it. And I could see how this story began to grow as I began to write it in a novel form. And like I said, it has not been released yet, but I just wanted to share that with you because you see, in some ways, we have sort of forgotten the Swiss Family Robinson story in our culture. And I ask young people today, have you ever heard of Swiss Family Robinson? Most of them say, no, what's that story? I've never heard of that story. And that blows me away because it's a classic. It's a classic. And so it's my goal to bring it back into the mainstream awareness. Disney even, as good of a job they did with the movie, I'll tell you what, they actually replaced the old, I remember when I was a kid going to Disneyland, I could go to the Swiss Family Robinson treehouse. Well, that's been, switched out for the Tarzan treehouse. And I know there's a treehouse in Walt Disney World, but we've almost forgotten this classic. And it's my goal to bring this classic back into the awareness of readers of great books. I love the story. It was a story of a great family who lived by great values and who had tremendous ingenuity and creativity and were able to take a deserted island and survive, and not just survive, but thrive. And it's a cool story, as my story begins 15 years later. Whatever happens to the family? Whatever happens to the boys when they grow up? Well, I have an entertaining story that stays true to the original characters, to the original story, and I cannot wait until that book comes out. But in the meantime, I thought I would just share a little bit of the backstory for you here. I hope you found that to be interesting and maybe a little bit insightful. If you're not already connected to me in some way, hey, I encourage you, if you're a Swiss Family Robinson fan, I encourage you to go to SwissFamilyReturns.com, become a subscriber. All you gotta do is put in your name and your email address, and you'll be the first to hear of interesting facts, trivia, things maybe you didn't know, videos that I come out with. Hey, I encourage you to become a subscriber. And you can also go to my Facebook page, which is Facebook.com/Return to Robinson Island. All right, pretty simple. Until I see you again on the next video, I wish you the very best. Bye for now.